Hello, everyone, and welcome to BC Transplant's virtual event, the Logan Boulet Effect, How a Selfless Gift Inspired Thousands. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Tina Robinson, Manager of Communications and Community Relations with BC Transplant. I know you're joining today from many parts of the province and even across Canada, but I'd like to acknowledge that we are broadcasting from Metro Vancouver, which is in the traditional territory of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. As we get started, I'd like to just go over a few housekeeping items, just so you know how to participate in today's event. You've joined the presentation by default with your audio and video muted. For those of you joining on your computer, you can submit text questions to our panelists by typing them into the questions pane found in the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of the meeting window. We've turned off the chat function just to make it easier for us to monitor the questions. Today's webinar is being broadcast on Facebook Live and will be made available online afterwards through BC Transplant. Before introducing our honored guests and moderator for our conversation, we need to acknowledge the significance of today, April 6th. Today marks 3 years since the terrible bus crash in 2018 involving the Humboldt Broncos team bus. 16 people died in that crash, a loss deeply felt by all Canadians. Logan Boulet was one of the young hockey players lost that day, and his legacy is the center of the conversation we're about to have. Just to get started, we're going to show this 3-minute video from TSN just to remind everyone of his story.
In his bedroom, where his absence is so strongly felt, it's hard to appreciate the Logan Boulet effect.
People like, it's so cool, and I was like, it's not, because like my brother's not here. Do you realize what had to happen? Like, he's gone. But as time comes along, I kind of realize like the magnitude and how it's impacted so many people.
The Logan Boulet effect began here at the Royal University Hospital on Friday, April 6th, the night of the Broncos bus crash. The next morning, Toby and Bernie Boulet were informed that their 21-year-old son had suffered an irreparable brain injury. Logan's parents decided to go public with some private information.
Our friend Neil Longevin, Logan's godfather, we texted Neil stuff, put something on Facebook because people would want information, right?
Hours later, Logan's godfather posted on social media. All counted, 6 people will receive the gift of life.
Then on Sunday at the vigil, it became obvious by then that people across Canada were registering to become organ donors, and we were like, wow.
The Humboldt Broncos tragedy swept across social media. The news about Logan Boulet, a registered organ donor, and his gift of life provoked an incredible reaction. Thousands upon thousands of people responded, with not just thoughts and prayers, but with action.
If he was able to respond and be like, no, it's nothing. Like, that's just what we should do. Like, I'd be like, whoa, like this is a little bit overwhelming. I don't know why I'm getting all this recognition.
In April, organ donor registration rates spiked right across Canada.
I want Logan's legacy to be that he gave back.
And obviously his legacy with the organ transplants is generational, because the people who receive them, their life will go on. They will have children, grandchildren.
It just says that he's a smart and compassionate, caring young man.
Rick Suggett, Logan's trainer and mentor, inspired Logan to become an organ donor. When Rick passed away in 2017 from a cerebral hemorrhage, he also gave the gift of life to 6 people.
He'd be like super proud of that kid.
This video by TSN really provides a good introduction to today's conversation. I'd like to ask all our speakers to now turn on their videos and unmute themselves. BC Transplant is honored to be joined today by Toby and Bernadine Boulet, the parents of Logan Boulet. Joining them are Jillianne Code, a two-time heart transplant recipient, and Stephen Gillis, a kidney transplant recipient, both from BC. We also welcome Elaine Yong to moderate the conversation this afternoon. Elaine has her own connection to transplant as her daughter Addison received a heart transplant as an infant. I'll turn it over to Elaine now. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, Tina. And I'm so honored to be with such a fantastic group of people. Of course, we can't see all of the wonderful participants who are joining in on our conversation today, but I can see little numbers down there. And I think that's so fantastic that so many of you who have so many Zoom meetings to go to are taking time out of your day to share it with us. As Tina mentioned, of course, today is a very special day. Green Shirt Day itself is tomorrow, but today is the day of the Humboldt Broncos bus crash. And I just want to take a moment for us to acknowledge that. I think that video was a really great setup to our conversation. We're going to get a chance to hear from everybody, of course, because we have lots of very well-spoken individuals who are really passionate about organ donation, both Jillianne and Stephen, of course, from the recipient side. As Tina mentioned, my daughter had a heart transplant. We're almost 10 years from her heart transplant. But I just wanted to get the conversation started. And Bernie, I had a question specifically for you, because I think, we've heard so much about the process of how Logan ultimately decided months before his death that he wanted to be an organ donor. And he had in fact signed up and registered on his birthday, but in the hospital, it was you. And I want you to take us through that. And, as a parent, as a mom, what was going through your head when all of this happened and you actually spoke those words?
Well, we had actually been at the crash site, and but I didn't go to where the actual bus was, and Toby had gone there, and we couldn't locate Logan. And I kept saying, "You got to go back. You got to go back. You got to find him." And then they had us all. The people that they hadn't located, we got sent. The family members got sent to a church in Nipawin. And then we got word that Logan was at the hospital. So we went to the hospital in Nipawin. There they told us that they were airlifting him to Saskatoon, to the Royal University Hospital, because he was one of the most serious injured. And we heard spinal injury, sort of missed the brainstem injury part. And we thought, okay, he can get past it, past a spinal injury, we can do this. So then we drove to Saskatoon, and when we arrived at Saskatoon, they had an area set aside for all the Bronco families. And finally, we got called to say that Logan was in ICU. And so we went down there thinking we're going to get to see our son, and we got stopped at the door. And when we got stopped at the door, they led us into a room with the lead trauma doctor, a neurosurgeon, a resident, a social worker, and the nurse who was in charge of Logan at that time. And we got told the news there that Logan had suffered an irreparable brain damage, brain injury, and that he was not recovering. And so you kind of let that sink in a bit. And then I thought, like, my son's strong, he's young, he's fit, he has organs that other people can use. And so I just said, is it possible to do organ donation? And the room just kind of stopped, and they kind of looked at me, and the social worker that was there kind of looked up, and I don't think they weren't ready for that, and as we have since found out, it doesn't work like that very often when families are in that kind of a situation, that there is that offer first. And so that's started the whole process of Logan becoming an organ donor. After that, I found out more that Toby had actually had a conversation with Logan about being an organ donor, and that had happened previously to that time, but I hadn't been there.
No.
And Toby, for you to hear those words come out of Bernie's mouth, and you're in the middle of a parent's worst nightmare, and did that trigger those conversations for you, or was it all just such a blur that, you were just kind of in the moment?
It was a blur up until when Bernie offered Logan's organs, and then it triggered that Logan told me. So I said that, and so they literally looked at just stunned eyes. They didn't know what to say, and okay, and that was basically. And then we asked second opinion, those things, and they said, well, the opinions are right here, and this is it. This is Saskatchewan University Hospital. This is where it is, and so we just agreed to move on, and I guess that's not a good word, but to move forward. And they brought the paperwork, and I became the paperwork guy. And then when we were by Logan's bedside, Bernie was looking after Logan, and they came over about 2 hours later. And the crash site is about 3 hours from Saskatoon. So the Paulsons had to pick up McLaren, who was with us, Logan's billet brother, and then they came back around to the hospital. And then I'm literally standing there with the transplant nurse going through all the paperwork, and McLaren, who's 13 at this time, just standing there. And we're talking about things. He goes, well, Logan told me. And we all just looked at him, what? And then he told the story of Logan telling him that they'd gone out to pick up errands, and they're outside the house, and it was Logan's 21st birthday on the weekend, and McLaren's 13. So it's like, hey, what are you doing? And he expected to hear something other than this. And Logan said, well, I'm going to sign my donor card on my birthday. And McLaren said, well, that's kind of creepy. And Logan said, no, that's what you need to do. Rick Suggett did it, and he could save 6 lives. So can I. And so he told McLaren, he told me, and away we went. After that, it was just, we have things to go. We want to spend time with Logan. And as Bernie pointed out later, we actually worked out to 27 hours. We got to be by Logan on his bedside, which is his number.
Wow. That's an incredible story. And I think, just to reiterate for those of you who aren't familiar, Rick Suggett was Logan's coach and mentor, who had the year prior become an organ donor. And that really inspired Logan in his decision. And I think that speaks to the ripple effects of organ donation that we've seen over the last 3 years, particularly from Logan's legacy. And that's where I want to bring in Jillianne Code and Stephen Gillis. Jillianne is a 2-time heart transplant recipient. So you're on to heart number 3 now, Jillianne. And Stephen, you may remember, he had his hockey team made a video that went viral when he was in desperate need of a kidney donor, and he's now received his kidney transplant. And recently, you and your donor just ran 5K together, which is incredible. So I wanted to bring the two of you in. Jillianne, I'll start with you. Both of you have a connection with Logan and with the Boulets and with the story. Not personal connection in terms of Logan's organs being donated to either of these people. I just want to make sure that's very clear, but a very personal connection emotionally.
Absolutely. This is a very emotional and moving time. And I would be remiss if I didn't really say exactly how Logan and the Boulets have affected me. And so thankfully I wrote this down. And so I don't have to think off the top of my head today, because I think I will probably not be able to say it as well as I wrote it. So if you will humor me for a minute, I will read an excerpt of exactly what Logan and Toby and Bernie mean to me. Dear Logan, I'm a 2-time heart transplant recipient. I have been brought to my knees twice in my lifetime, only to be saved by people like you. You do not know me, nor did you in life. You are not my donor, but I speak to you now as though you were. Today, our country remembers you, your teammates who died, and those in recovery, through which the spirit of a nation is brought together. Tomorrow, maybe some will move on, but I will not. I will remember you always. People like you and my 2 heart donors. With every breath I take, every heartbeat I hear, and through the warm pulse of blood that flows through my veins, giving me life. You are my hero. My donors are my heroes. My donor families and yours are the ones I live for, the ones I strive to live and be better for, the ones I try to figure out how to honor every day. A purpose that fills my waking mind is in every action I take, and whom I dream of meeting when I close my eyes. And I'm so very grateful that I actually get to say these words to you, Toby and Bernie. I guess I don't have to close my eyes anymore.
Thank you, Jillian. That was, I read it when you wrote it originally, and it's just still so powerful, even all these months and years later. Stephen, let's talk about you a little bit. And I want you to share your connection to Logan and the Boulets. Obviously, you said there's the hockey connection, so I get that one.
Yeah, thought I knew I was going to make it through this without crying a bunch. So my identity as the crying coach lives on. That was really beautiful, Jillian. I'm sorry, very moved. And as you said, it's very emotional. Organ donation is such an emotional thing, such an individual thing, but like all of us, it takes a village. It's my dog. It's not me. What I want to say is, Logan, I truly feel that, you said I have a hockey connection, obviously, with Logan, and although we never had the opportunity to meet, I feel very God, it's easier when you're watching these things. Very close to him, not only because I've had the pleasure of an honor of meeting Toby and Bernie and spending time with them, and like all of you, so touched by the story, but I truly believe without Logan bringing the attention that he did and the Logan Boulet Effect to organ donation, I wouldn't. I'm really trying, guys. I wouldn't have received my organ, my kidney donor, Michael, who's my hero. But Logan is also my hero. He's basically like Terry Fox to me. I was very young when Terry Fox had his impact and unfortunately passed and left his legacy. But Logan has left a very similar legacy for me, organ donation, and many others. I swear I'm articulate. You said we could speak well. I'm trying. But Logan's lasting impact, I think, really helped it resonate in the mainstream about organ donation and a legacy out of, an awful tragedy, but taught people that you can give back, that your life just doesn't end when you end, that you can pass it on. And ultimately, I think that that's how it even got into the realm of the minds of, 11 and 12-year-olds who, on behalf of me, were able to make a video that went viral, that was seen by eventually my organ donor, and also resulted in people coming forward. But like that connection and what he did, I think is the real spark. And I live each day to try and honor his memory and advocate on his behalf, on Toby and Bernie's behalf. And just let people know that one, organ donation isn't scary. I'm doing great. Michael's doing great. And it's really, whether you're a living donor or you just sign up to donate, to pass along and leave your legacy to keep moving forward, it's the most amazing gift you can give anyone. And I think a lot of what has been happening in Canada as a result of Logan. So I am forever indebted. And like Jillianne said, I try to live for him and honor his memory and advocate on his behalf and for my donor as well. But they're both heroes to me. And I just could not be more thankful for what he did, and also what Toby and Bernie did on his behalf and continue to do. They're amazing leaders, and we need more people like them.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, everyone, we all have our Kleenex handy. So I should have warned all of our participants at the beginning that this conversation will be very likely very emotional. I do want to talk a bit about the actual Logan Boulet effect, as there's even a hashtag, of course. So this is a real thing. And just to give you an example of how much impact it had, in BC here, so we've got some numbers from April 2018. So that was obviously 3 years ago, right around the time of all of this. If you compare it with the month prior, so in March 2018, we had 461 people in BC register to be organ donors. April, just a few weeks later, almost 7,000. So you can see, you're going from around 500 to 7,000. A year later, when we celebrated the first official Green Shirt Day, we had 7,300 people register in that month compared to, again, just 1,100 the month prior. So we're talking multiple, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plus times the normal amount of people who would register as organ donors. And that's just in BC. So I think, there have been some stats that have been put out there. Toby and Bernie, maybe you have some of those more recent numbers, 100,000 people I've heard in the initial months following the Humboldt Broncos bus crash. I remember seeing the tweet actually that went out because of course we're well connected with the organ donation community that night. And I remember my husband and I were like, oh my God, this is just incredible. It was, as recipients like Jillianne and Stephen, we also feel such a connection to all of our living donors, our donor families. Now, I want to hear from you, Toby and Bernie, on what the legacy has meant. You guys have talked about how you made a real conscious effort afterwards, and you had that discussion where you decided you were going to go with this, that you could either hide or you could go with it. And obviously it's been 3 years. Has it been what you expected, hoped? What has been the legacy for you?
That's another great way to ask earlier today. A great question. It's another great question. It happened. It just happened. And then we discussed that as Bernie said earlier today, we left our front door open. We just leave our door open, let the sun shine in, and people just kept coming and coming. And that's fine. We want people to come. We weren't about to roll up our shades or roll down our window shades and hide in the house. That wasn't what we're going to do. And that right away put us out there to the media. And then Neil Longman, who Stephen met in Vancouver, he said to us, they're going to come. And we said, who's going to come? They're just going to come, whoever they are. And they came. And then that moved us forward to Logan Boulet's fund with the kids sport, the Logan Boulet Foundation and Endowment Fund with the City of Lethbridge Community Foundation, and then also Green Shirt Day. And then Green Shirt Day just continues to grow and just grow. And even though there's been a pandemic and organ donor registration have dropped by 39% during the pandemic, the Green Shirt Day movement is just still growing. And however it's going to take us, who knew that Saskatchewan was going to change completely to an online registration? And the Minister of Health would say in the press conference, Logan Boulet helped this happen. And that Alberta would change, and Tyler Shandro would make reference to Logan. And Nova Scotia would become a presumed consent province. And Dr. Stephen Beebe, who leads the transplant programs in Nova Scotia, was one of his physicians at his bedside. We didn't know any of those things. And so it just continues to grow, and we just continue to move with it. And we're here to make sure that it goes in a positive direction. We have control so far, and we want to keep it that way. You want to add to that?
I think that when we look at the legacy and the impact, we never thought it would ever, it would grow like this, because yes, we knew about organ donor registration and we knew about transplantation, but we certainly weren't involved in it like we are now. And it has really snowballed, I guess you might call it, just how much it's increased in our knowledge and what we know. And just, we try to have that conversation as much as we can with people to just let it kind of percolate in their brain about organ donor registration. And we really see the impact when people come up to us that we don't know and tell us we've registered, or I've registered because of Logan. I've registered because of Green Shirt Day. I registered because I heard your story. And we know that for people like Stephen, who were waiting for that kidney, how much that impacts them to know that there are people registering and there are people wanting to be a donor. And we know that that's important, and that hope, I guess, and the fact that we were trying to find something positive we weren't trying to find, it was just something positive that came out of that crash that was so tragic. There's many things that have come out of it, but this has been one thing that has certainly been a ray of hope and a ray of sunshine.
Toby, I know you've talked about how initially, even though you and Bernie had decided that you were going to be open and you're going to let it come, as you said, that it was hard for you, and especially when recipients would come up to you and, you know, be gushing and thankful, you actually found it really difficult. I thought that was really interesting, and I'm hoping you can share a little bit more about that.
Found it incredibly difficult. Our first speaking engagement was in Saskatoon, and people just come up to you and they just want to tell you how wonderful this is, and it's beautiful, and thank you so much. And we're like, our son passed away, like Marco said in the video. Like, that was in September, they filmed that TSN video. It's like Marco said, like, don't you realize that Logan had to die? It took a long time to sort that out in our mind. And it was literally going to, when we went to the kidney one in Vancouver, we met Stephen, and we brought our Logan's godparents, Neil and Carla, with us. I began to see, and Bernie had already felt it, I guess, that it's not such a bad thing. That had to happen, and it's going to work. And then when I read Jillianne's blog, it just kind of like, have you seen this? Oh my gosh. That really sunk in, that organ donor recipients are so thankful, and they're thankful every single day. It's not just, we love what you've done. They understand, and they're thankful every single day. And so, Enrico's changed how she thinks too. It's no longer that Logan just had to die.
I think that we don't really realize, at the beginning, we certainly didn't realize that impact and what would happen, because it was very much about us and the fact that Logan had passed away and that we'd lost someone significant in our lives. But then you see that the good that could come out of it not only was with just the people who were recipients of Logan's organs and his corneas, but also just how it had impacted so many other people. And it was, I don't know, it was weird, really weird. The first time someone came up to me and said, "Oh, we're so thankful for all the work you've done." And it just sort of felt like, but it's just the right thing to do. We're just trying to help people. That's what we do. We just help out people. And that was odd to be recognized for something that didn't feel like it should be that significant, because to us, it was just the right thing to do. But as you know, and many of the people watching today, it is significant. So we thank you for the thanks.
Absolutely. And, you know, I want to bring Jillianne and Stephen back into the conversation here, because when we talk about organ donor and donor families, you know, living donors, you get to see them, and most of the time. And so, like in Stephen's case, you've been able to sort of give your gratitude and thanks in person. But when it comes to donor families, it's a difficult area, I think, for a lot of recipients to navigate as well. You know, there's an incredible amount of guilt. But, you know, when you hear the Boulets speak about sort of what it's brought to them, let's talk a bit about what we can do to help facilitate donor families and you know, the whole idea of supporting them through this. What do donor families need? How can we make this a little bit smoother for them? You know, what are we doing that we need to improve on and improve that relationship? Because in some ways, the Boulets have become sort of the spokespeople for donor families, whether you want to or not. That's kind of where you've landed. But there are, of course, hundreds, thousands of other donor families out there who maybe don't want to be in the spotlight at all. They don't want to share their story, but I'm sure there are many others who would love to talk about their loved one's legacy. So I want to hear from you. Let's start with you, Stephen. What are your thoughts on that?
It's definitely interesting. I know, I can kind of only speak sort of to my own experience with Michael, but part of it that I found is, sometimes, to your point, some people don't want the spotlight, but it usually is the recipient that gets a lot of the attention. And I think that is something that needs rectifying or change as well. And that whether, again, living or like Logan, passing on the gift of life and sharing his good health with others, that needs to be in the spotlight. I think mostly to prove that it's not scary, especially for living donors, that you can move on, and then also just to get it out there that that legacy of we all wonder what we're going to leave when it's our time, and this is one way to kind of give back and leave your legacy and have your spirit live on in others and them pass it on and so on. So I think just one big thing as far as donor families is to help those that are comfortable with being recognized and hearing their stories as much as you hear the recipients. I mean, I'm very appreciative of the attention that I've been given so that I can give attention to others, not myself, but also just I think, yeah, we need to hear more from donors and donor families.
Thank you for that. Jillianne, what are your thoughts on this?
I would agree with Stephen that we do need to provide some more attention to donor families. But one thing that I think is really extremely difficult to do and is to speak through the grief of the tragedy of what has happened to your loved one. And like my position is obviously different than Stephen's in that I've had 2 deceased donor heart transplants, and obviously it's a very difficult place mentally to be. And that's one thing that when Toby was speaking, he's saying that Logan had to die, right, in order for somebody to live, and that's that phrase is something that he didn't have to die, right, but he did, and that's, as a recipient, something that you carry with you is that you try to switch it from that somebody had to die to that somebody did, and they made them and their family made this incredible choice, and because of that choice I am here for myself more than once, and I carry both of my donors with me all the time. And so what we can do, and what I hope to do, to continue to hope to do, is to elevate that voice. And if it means that I am out front speaking to these things a little bit more than maybe other donor families will see, that the sacrifice that they made can have an impact, and I have no idea what that grief is like, but I commend Toby and Bernie for their bravery in speaking about their grief so publicly. And that's the thing, is that it's very difficult for people to do. And so it's not going to be right for everyone. And working with organizations and doing the speaking that you're doing, and platforms like this are really, really important. And so that's, one thing that I think we can definitely do. I know that Stephen is connected with the Kidney Foundation, in my organization that I founded with another transplant recipient, Mark Baines, heart transplant recipient. It's called the Heart Life Foundation, and we one of our missions is to elevate and to speak about these things with respect to heart transplant. So we've managed to find each other, and so that's what we need to do, and show that there is a community of support there, and you don't have to suffer in silence.
Thank you, Stephen and Jillianne. You know, we only have 10 minutes left, which is really sad. I mean, we know that we could all talk for hours, but I'm sure other people have things that they want to do. So I do want to get to some of the questions that have come in. And I think this one in particular really resonates with me. For many parents who care for their beloved children and family members, how do you start the conversation about sharing a gift of life? And I think, you know, in particular, when it comes to children, whether they're older children like Logan, they're still always your babies, or younger children. I mean, Addison was under 4 weeks old, so her donor was a 6-day-old baby. So how do you start that conversation? People find it really uncomfortable. And, you know, I know, Jillianne, you mentioned that Bernie and Toby, you have been really open in sharing your grief. And I think that's amazing because it normalizes the process of grieving. It normalizes those feelings. It normalizes, you know, the sad, the bad, but also highlights some of the good. What can we do as a society to get that conversation moving so that we can have that kitchen table talk, Toby, as you coined the phrase?
So it's interesting because that's a perfect kind of question. Last week we had to have Green Shirt Day at our school because we're off at Easter break. So I teach grade 2 at a K-5 school, and we've had that conversation with our students. And I'm very fortunate that I'm in a very supportive school, that they believe in being very open to that. So by us having a conversation at school with our kids and trying to explain about organ donation and what it really is just donating organs when you're not going to need them anymore because of a multitude of different reasons. And we just had those kids go home and hope and have conversations. And I just kept talking to my students in my class, like, did you talk to your family about Green Shirt Day? Like, what did they think about it? What did you talk about? And one of the little girls turned to me, and she's 7 years old, and said, I told my mom and dad that I want to be an organ donor when I can be. And she was 7 years old. And the kids are just having this conversation just matter-of-factly, and they're just talking about it. So I think it's just, you know, as a parent, you are worried about it. And because it means that you possibly you're going to pass away, or you will be an angel donor. But there's also the people like Michael who donated to Stephen, who's not an angel donor. And so there's lots of opportunities to be able to do that. But just having that conversation, little kids are open to that, and they will talk about it and they will chat about it. It's more of a parent thing than it is a kid thing. The kids are really good about that. And so that I was so thankful to hear the kids say that at our school, and they stopped at the bulletin board. They talked about the bulletin board. So that was awesome. Just, they can do that.
Toby, do you have something to add? I think
I'm just looking at how many questions there are in the time. No, Bernie, I taught high school kids. I don't.
Oh. Totally different.
They're different. It's interesting. A lady spoke with Barb Valentine, spoke with Stephen at a grad kind of thing, and they talked about empowerment, and that was awesome. I talked about that this morning in one of our interviews, and that high school kids feel empowered when they leave school now, that they can they make their own decisions. I'm going to register in Alberta at 18. I'm leaving high school. I'm leaving high school in British Columbia. When I turn 19, I get to make that decision. I'm going to register. That's pretty cool. I never thought of that until Barb brought it up.
Stephen and Jillianne, do you guys have anything to add? You know, how can we make that conversation just normalized and that everyone feels comfortable in discussing it? That it's not something that's, you know, dark and depressing. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I guess I'll go, Stephen. I think realizing and recognizing that there is normal, natural processes in life, right? And that, you know, one thing that you can do is to normalize the discussion about what happens after you die, or what happens to you physically after you die. And so that part, you know, as we celebrate birth, we should be looking at, well, how do we honor those who have passed, and having those open and honest conversations are really, really important, and something that everybody experiences. And so you shouldn't hide from pain. And that's one thing that my life experience up to all the multiple things that have happened to me is that you can't run away from it, because this is what it's always going to be there. There's questions about grief in the Q&A there, and it's like we shouldn't hide from it, right? It's part of the process. And so being open and recognizing it, that's what at least that's what I would hope for. Stephen?
Thank you. Stephen, you've got 30 seconds because I do have a couple more really good questions that I'd love to get to.
I'll be quick. The crying has ceased for a moment. Yeah, I completely agree. Just normalizing the conversation. I mean, Michael and our story was actually used in classrooms across Canada. It ended up being a part of Canadian Reader or whatnot, and they animated the whole story. And then the kids would have to do a report on organ donation and whatnot. So I'm seeing it happen at the younger ages, and I think it has to happen at the older ages too. They're very open to having this conversation, but I think, yeah, just normalizing it and knowing that, finding purpose in your struggle. Life for all of us is a struggle. And this is a way to find purpose in that and also give back and provide a legacy.
Thank you. Okay, so I've got 2 questions left for the Boulets. So thank you, Stephen and Jillianne. One question comes from our guests here. They want to know about family veto. And I thought I'd pose this one just to you guys because I think this is most relevant. There is this, I don't know if it's officially law in all the provinces, but I know in BC that even if someone is registered as an organ donor, that the family can technically say no at the time of potential donation. What are your thoughts on that?
Go ahead. I'm against it. I think that the other side of that is that in many provinces, it goes off the will, like your will. It's the same thing. An organ registration is the same as your will, your last will and testament. So you have to follow that. So if someone is registered to be an organ donor in many provinces, that is your last will. However, there's not transplant surgeons or hospitals that are going to do a transplant in Canada if the family says no. So I don't think, personally, if someone has made a decision to be an organ donor, they thought about it, they did it, it's done, boom. And that's like you go to Nova Scotia, where it's presumed consent, and Bernie talks lots about the conversation. Even though Nova Scotia is presumed consent, that hasn't covered the conversation. You need to tell your family that you want to be an organ donor if you pass away. And I don't think the family veto should exist.
Yeah, I think that conversation is huge. Like if you've never had that conversation with your family to say, I want to be an organ donor, they may not know that. And they may see it as like invasive to them and to their time with you. So I think that conversation can prevent that family veto from happening at times.
Just a quick little add-on to that. I know time is ticking. You can make decisions at what I did about what can be transplanted and what not. We wanted to have an open casket because Logan was beautiful. He had no visual markings after being in a bus crash, and we didn't want to be a closed casket. Then the world thought that, oh my gosh, he's torn to pieces. That's not what happened. And so certain things could happen, certain things couldn't. And so that's how we did it.
Thank you. Okay, so to wrap up our very intense and emotional conversation, my last question is, and it's also one that one of our guests has asked, what would Logan think? I mean, you've been asked this before. What would he think? And he sounds like he was very humble and just kind of like it's no big deal, right? Do you still feel that way 3 years later?
I think so. I still think that he would, we both think that he would still say like, that it was the right thing to do. It was the thing to do in that situation. He wasn't going to survive. This was a way that he could give back and to be able to help others. He would be still saying like, it was just the right thing to do, is what needed to happen. And I don't need all the recognition or that has happened from it. We still think that.
When it all came out, there's all kinds of little mini articles all over the world in newspapers and magazines, and you got quotes from anybody they could find. Well, one of the vice presidents of the Broncos, he got his say, and they asked, what do you think of all these guys? And his comment on Logan Boulet was, bad. You need help? You go, Logan, it's done. Other guys, not so much. But Logan's like, where do you want me to go? Who do you want me to bring? How many guys? Let's get it done. They need help. Let's go. So I don't think that would have changed in 3 years. I don't think so.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about the bad part, but
Maybe he would have used a different terminology.
no, we wouldn't have.
Thank you, everyone, so much. I would like to remind you all again, today is the day of the Humboldt Broncos bus crash. So please take a moment to remember all of those who passed, as well as those who are still recovering. It has been a long road, I know, for the survivors and their family members. And also that tomorrow is Green Shirt Day. So wear anything green, a green hat, a green scarf, whatever you've got. Wear green tomorrow, wear green today, wear green all the time. We do have some unanswered questions and we'll try to get those answered. I'm not sure where we'll post them, but I'm sure Tina can help us out with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Just on behalf of BC Transplant, I just want to thank each and every one of you for participating in this today and sharing and being so generous with your time and sharing your stories. It was there was at least one comment that came through just to thank you and let you know how moving it was for everyone who was following along. So thank you again. And yeah, reiterating what Elaine says, please everyone wear green tomorrow and take that moment to, if you haven't already registered your decision, to do so and to talk to your family and friends about what that decision is, so that they're able to uphold your wishes if it ever came to that. So thanks again. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Be well, folks.
You too.